του θετικού. Είναι μέλος του Ινστιτούτου Θετικών Επιστημών της Ινδίας, καθηγήτρια θεωρητικής φυσικής στοιχειωδών σωματιδίων. Έχει εργαστεί σε πολλά πανεπιστήμια στην Ινδία, την Ευρώπη και την Αμερική, καθώς και στο ΣΕΡ. Έχει συγγράψει περισσότερα από 300 ερευνητικά άρθρα τα τελευταία 40 χρόνια που εργάζεται στον χώρο των θετικών επιστημών. Η ερευνητική δουλειά της στον χώρο των αλληλεπιδράσεων σωματιδίων στους επιταχυντές ήταν πρωτοποριακή. Είναι εκλεγμένο μέλος των 3 Ακαδημιών Θετικών Επιστημών της Ινδίας και της Παγκόσμιας Ακαδημίας Θετικών Επιστημών. Συμμετέχει ενεργά σε πολλές εθνικές και διεθνείς επιτροπές για τη διευκόλυνση της συμμετοχής και απασχόλησης των γυναικών στις θετικές επιστήμες. Έχει λάβει πολλά επιστημονικά βραβεία και τιμητικές διακρίσεις, μεταξύ των οποίων το βραβείο Padma Shri, που είναι η υψηλότερη τιμητική διάκριση της Ινδικής κυβέρνησης για τους πολίτες της και του οποίου υπήρξε η πρώτη γυναίκα αποδέκτης. Η σημαντικότερη όμως τιμητική της διάκριση, που ήρθε πριν 2 περίπου χρόνια, ήταν όταν έλαβε το Ordre National du Mérite, θα μπορούσαμε να το πούμε στα ελληνικά, να το αποδώσουμε ελεύθερα, Εθνικό Παράσημο της Αξίας, που είναι η υψηλότερη τιμητική διάκριση της γαλλικής κυβέρνησης. Απονέμεται από τον πρόεδρο της Γαλλικής Δημοκρατίας και απονομήθηκε στη δόκτωρα Γκότμπολε για τη συνδρομή της στην Ινδογαλλική συνεργασία στον χώρο της φυσικής υψηλών ενεργειών και για την διοργάνωση κοινών γαλλοϊνδικών προγραμμάτων για τις γυναίκες και στις φυσικές επιστήμες. Σήμερα θα αναφερθεί στις συνθήκες που εργάζονται οι γυναίκες στις θετικές επιστήμες και θα μας το δώσει όλα τα μηνύματα που θέλει μέσα και από προσωπικές της εμπειρίες. Όπως ήδη είδατε σε αυτό το σημείο, να σας ενημερώσω και όλα ότι η ομιλία της δόκτωρας Γκότμπολη θα μαγνητοσκοπηθεί. Μας το ζήτησε η ίδια. Αυτά είχα να πω. Φυσικά θα είναι στα αγγλικά η ομιλία της. Έχουμε ζητήσει να μιλάει όσο πιο αργά μπορεί. Εντάξει, ό,τι μπορούμε. Professor Godbole, if you please, now the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Though I understood just precisely 2 or 3 words in what you said, but it's always a pleasure to talk to the young girls whom you are, with whom you are putting together this program. So let me wish all of you and all of us actually a very happy day, International Day for Girls and Women in Science, which is what we all are. And we are all hoping that the tribe will grow in size. So Maria and Despina did ask me to talk to you. And I decided that it's a great, having had wonderful experiences at the earlier times in terms of the questions and answers, I really did not want to pass up this opportunity to talk to all of you across the seas, far away from here. And this is the great gift that science has given us. So let me begin by again wishing you all a very, very happy International Women's and Girls Day, Women in Science, Women and Girls in Science. So what thought I would do is I would talk to you about doing physics, but in particular particle physics, in India mostly, and as a woman. So there are 3 aspects to my life, as it were. I'm a physicist, I'm a woman, and I have worked most of my life in India in a subject which is particle physics, which is a very global subject. So last time also, with my friend Despina's help, I decided that I will make my first slide also in Greek. And I think I can only read this here, Rohini Godbole, but I will, and India, for example, but she has done the whole translation bit. And again, so this is the good day, which I am particularly happy actually, because, for many decades, many of us women scientists ended up talking at International Women's Day. And we felt that that was too broad a canvas And to discuss the issues that are specific to women and girls in science, we needed a special forum, and that is indeed today's day. So what am I? You have already heard, but in my own words, I'm a theoretical particle physicist from India. And what does a particle physicist do? I work with theories of elementary building blocks of nature and how they are put together to form everything around us. And in particular, because this subject is very vast, in particular, I work at the exploration of these theories about the laws of nature that we have developed. But the exploration that I am interested in is quite often at the colliders, like the Large Hadron Collider, LHC at CERN. And I have worked I've met and worked with my experimentalist friends. Some of them are, for example, Hara Petridou, who spoke to you earlier, and Despina, who is going to be talking to you later. So my speaking to you across the seas actually tells you how global the subject of particle physics is. And now I have been working for more than 45 years, first as a PhD student and then as a scientist. So, before I begin and tell you why is it important that women should be in science and, so on and so forth, I would like to tell you, as future scientists, what is it that one looks forward to in a life of science? And I will do that by sharing my own, what I call aha moments. And those aha moments for me have been finding some very small, no matter how small, but something new, some new aspect about the laws of nature, about the theories of laws of nature, which was not known till then. And let me tell you, the thrill of that is absolutely amazing. And then, particularly for a theoretical physicist, I do calculations, I do predictions. And when the results of my calculation or my theoretical predictions are in agreement with the data, or if a method that I have suggested to tease out some aspect of theory from observation is actually used, that is an aha moment. One of the real aha moments in my own life has been that I spent my lifetime as a part of the worldwide community of Higgs hunters. I began my research, as you will hear later, in 1974. And then in 2012, when the Higgs boson was discovered and the announcement was made at CERN, as it happened, I was present in the audience. And not just that, I was able to lecture about this huge and humongous discovery 2 hours later to summer students at CERN who had come there from all over the world. In my life now, I have met students of different nationalities in many different places in the world. And then another aha moment is to see them somewhere years after you have lectured them. And then they say, oh, didn't you give us such and such lectures? So these are, I would say, the aha moments in the life of a scientist like me. And last but not the least, I co-edited a book with a chemist friend of mine, Professor Ram Ramaswamy, who actually used to be the president of Indian Academy of Sciences. And we edited a book containing stories about 100 women in science in India, women scientists, and we call them Leelavati's daughters. Now, this book was brought about 15 years ago. But about 2 years ago, this book, imagine, featured in the penultimate round of the Indian version of Who Will Be a Millionaire. So this actually gave me some indication and some hope that the idea of women scientists is becoming a part of the Indian social psyche. And as I would tell you in the next few minutes, I started my school studies in an all-girls school where till the 7th class, we were taught only home science. and not even any other aspect of science. So for a person like me to have been able to experience these aha moments, it's a bit like, there used to be a very old Virginia Slim, I think, the cigarette ad, which used to say, "You have come a long way, baby." So let me begin by presenting to you, since you're all physics students, you know what is meant by world line. I will present you my world line as a student of science and a young researcher. Then my world line as a senior scientist. And then my world line as a scientist who happens to be a woman. And then what I really want to emphasize in telling you about in this world line is what is it that helped me do this? And what do we need to do so that more of you become active scientists? So I'll give you this, different aspects I would like to focus on when I try to give you a glimpse of my journey. So I would try to say, tell you what is meant, the issues that I will focus on, though I will not do it in this order. It's what is meant by the life of a scientist of any gender. What is the aim? What are the challenges? And what are the excitements of a life in science? What does a life in science require? What are the steps that one needs to take to prepare oneself for it? Then what are the milestones by which one measures the journey? And what are the special aspects that one needs to pay attention to or one faces because one is a woman? So these are the 5 different aspects on which I will try to, I'll tell you many stories, basically. I'll tell you a story. But I'm hoping that the different parts of the story will give you a glimpse into answers to these 5 questions. I should also tell you that the origin of this kind of a talk is actually in a talk that I gave at the first international conference on women in physics, which was held in Paris by the International Union of Pure and Applied Physics, IUPAP, in 2001. In fact, I remember my friend Hara was a member of the Indian delegation, and I was a speaker from the, she was a member of the Greek delegation, and I was a speaker along with the Indian delegation. But when I started preparing this talk, to be honest, till that talk, I never thought of scientists in the context of being a woman. Because this particular talk actually started my involvement in the cause of women's participation in science. So this is very important to me. And I'm going to share actually the front page of my article that was published in the conference proceedings. As you can see, this is AIP conference proceedings. The publication conference proceedings were published in 2002. And what I was supposed to talk about was being a woman physicist and Indian perspective. So as you can see, what I am talking to you is some version of this very old talk that I gave 2000. Don't worry, it's updated. So, in that article I wrote, and I thought I should bring it to you here, because the education systems in different countries, different continents are quite different. So let me tell you what happens in India. In India, a student typically goes through 11 or 12 years of schooling, 3 stages of schooling, primary, secondary, and higher secondary. And then it gets followed by 3 years of college, which gives you a bachelor's degree in science. And then 2 more years, normally at a state-funded university, towards a master's. And then one joins a research program for a PhD. In some cases, the bachelor's and the master's degrees are obtained at one of the many Indian Institute of Technologies, or my own institution, Indian Institute of Science, which are somehow the elite institutions of higher education in India. And now they are even more. This was in 2002. And while the bulk of the research funding and activity in India goes to these research institutions, many of the good universities also have good research groups, which focus on somewhat narrow areas of research. So this is what the situation is in India. And actually, my life has more or less followed on the same lines. I studied in an all-girls high school for 11 years. This is what the first 11 years. And I studied, the medium of instruction for me was my mother tongue, Marathi. Just to tell you, in India, there are 14 or 15 different state languages. So depending on which state you live in, the language, the local language, the native language is different. So quite often the medium of instruction is still English, but I studied in school, which gave me instruction in my mother tongue. Then, of course, when I went to bachelor's degree, then the medium of instruction moved over to English. I studied for that in a local college in my hometown. Then I went and did my 2 years of master's program in one of these elite research institutes. I then worked for my PhD at the State University of New York at Stony Brook. And then after my PhD, I have spent time almost in equal proportions at a university, as well as the two most elite science institutions in India, namely the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research and the Indian Institute of Science. Okay. Now, I mentioned already the book Lilavati's Daughters, which are the stories of Indian women scientists. I edited it, but I also contributed to it. And in case you people are interested in this book, the slides will be available. You can go and look at this URL that I have put here, which will actually give you the URL, stories of 100 women scientists. This is actually the beginning of my own story in that collection. So now let's begin with my world line. As I said, I was born in 1952. So now I'm about 70 years old. I was born in Pune in a middle-class family, which valued education, and we were family only with girls. And in fact, my mother was very passionate about education. She herself finished her bachelor's degree after three of us, me and my two sisters, were born. And she did her bachelor's after the birth of her fourth daughter. And I must say that my father was supportive of her education. And you have to realize that this came from a century almost that is unknown to us, where my mother could not study mathematics beyond the 6th class because there was no female teacher to teach it. So when she had to do her degree in education in 1968, 70 actually, I taught her statistics and mathematics. In 1968, 1960, this is wrong, 1960, I got cleared a particular state exam with maybe 20,000 or 50,000 students, and you got 10 scholarships. And I got one of those scholarships. And that was somehow the beginning. And as I will tell you, the story of my journey in science, because you see what happened. In this exam, there used to be a course in paper in science, question paper. So till then, none of us, my students from my school would get it, because we were taught only home science till the 7th class. And this exam used to be in the 7th class. So my school teachers actually took extra time out to help me prepare for this examination. And one of my teachers asked me to come home, where her husband, who was also a school teacher, but not in our school, started teaching me science. And this was my own stepping stone in science. In fact, I must also tell you, as a related fact, that in 1966, this is an essay that I wrote in our school magazine. And this was an essay competition, which was called Reforms That May Be Introduced in My School. This was the title. This is me. And you see what I wrote in that. I wrote exactly this, that I wrote that domestic science I understand that every girl should know domestic science to make her a good housewife, but my practical experience is that this is a great handicap for me in high school scholarship examination. Then I went on to say, I don't suggest that home science should not be taught, but I suggest that general science should also be taught. In fact, a specific detailed course in mathematics, which used to be taught only in the 11th class, I suggested that it should be taught from the 10th class onwards. And believe it or not, my school teacher actually sat me opposite herself. I left the school in 1969, sat me opposite herself, discussed these issues with me. And after I left the school, both these reforms were actually implemented. So I am telling you this story. I'm telling you this story to tell you that one has to figure out what are the things that one needs to move on in the particular path. In my case, I wanted to move on to science. And then you need to create the resource. People help you if you help yourself. So don't always sit back and bemoan the lack of something and say, oh, we cannot do something because we don't have this. Sometimes it may not be always possible, but you must try. In 1969, actually, after I left the school, I appeared for something called National Science Talent Search Examination. This was a government program to identify young children who are enthusiastic about science and who have expertise in science. And this particular program was actually very useful to me because it widened my horizons beyond my little hometown where I was studying for 11 years, even in my own mother tongue. So government programs which were constructed to attract young people to pure science and research actually helped me. Then in 1972, I received my bachelor's degree from a place called Pune, the Pune University. I was actually the topper. Then I went to Indian Institute of Technology that I have already mentioned to you. And then I got master's. Just to give you a feeling, the institutes of technology are more like Scuola Superiore or something like of that level. And I think I could go there. I mean, of course, I got admission because of my grades, because of the way I performed in the entrance exams. But financially, I could go there because it involved going to a different town simply because I had this scholarship. So I was lucky that I could create my own financial resources also, which helped me to go further. Because if I hadn't gone to Indian Institute of Technology in 1972, I doubt very much that I would be here talking to you today. In 1974, I finished my master's in Indian Institute of Technology. And this institute was really dominated by males. I mean, when there were about 800 male students in the institute, the women's hostel had 50 rooms. They were not all full. So we were about 40 women students of all variety and about 800 male students. As it happened, I topped my class in master's in physics, and I got what is called the Institute Silver Medal, and I was the first woman student to get it in physics. Here, I must tell you that I had extremely supportive and extremely friendly classmates. In the class, we were 3 girls in a class of 17, and we all 3 were in the top 5. And I don't remember any gender bias or either in the teaching or the appreciation of our success. We didn't have any bias in the treatment by class friends. And I checked it out with my friends again to make sure that this is not some ideal imagination, dream that I am dreaming. But there was actually a protective attitude from some of my teachers. When I wanted to go to US to do a PhD, which I did go in 1974, before I went, my teacher kind of said, why do you want to go abroad? We'll find you a good advisor here in India. Girls should not go alone all the way to a differently new country. But to all said and done, it was only due to the protective attitude and not because he didn't think that I couldn't do it. In 1979, I finished my PhD and I came back to India. I think it was not completely a wise decision. I had two other postdoctoral offers, one from Europe and one from USA. And knowing what I know about a scientist's career, I would say that I should have done some postdoctoral, taken up a postdoctoral position before coming back to India. And I would say at this point that it's only now when I look back, I realize that this was some kind of a negative mentoring by my supervisor. I mean, he never, encouraged me to, told me that I must also have a postdoctoral experience. But in all this, I think the family support and support of friends had played a very important role. In 1974 to 79, I stayed in the US, and it was a period when India was quite different from the rest of the world. So going out in the wide world directly to US was actually quite a big experience. And I think my family support and support of my friends was very important. Then in 79 to 83, I was a postdoctoral fellow in the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. Luckily, in these 3 years, I worked very hard, and I also got a lot of success. I had 3 papers in a journal called Physical Emulators, which in those times for physicists was in fact perhaps even more important than getting papers published in Nature. And looking back, I think I could have certainly done with more support and more positive mentoring. And the gender dependence of the mentoring process is become apparent to me only on reflection. I'll come back to it when I specifically talk about the subject. 83 to 93, I was at University of Mumbai, which is a state university, and 3 years among these were spent at University of Dortmund and University of Hamburg. During this time, I met my now ex-husband in Germany. We got married, and I led a multiple tasking life, across the continents. I had a job in India, he had a job in Europe. And at that time, I experienced a few things which only now I interpret as women unfriendly. Because beginnings right after your PhD and the first few years, these are the first 10 years, 12 years after your PhD, are the most crucial years in the life of a scientist. And that these beginnings are always the tricky ones. And I must say that in the period, say 1980 to 1993, it is this period when I developed as my own person. I created my own niche. I had my PhD students. And I was lucky to hit upon some extremely interesting and productive areas of research. As a theoretical physicist, that's all that you require. I was able to get some very interesting conclusions, which were of interest to the entire community. I set up some very useful collaborations, international as well as national. I started getting invited at the national level schools and conferences. And, this time, as I said, was the difficult time, and it's a difficult time for any scientist when they're trying to establish themselves. I had a somewhat more difficult time than usual other scientists. So I had gone to a conference in this period I think it was to Poland, and we were coming back. And at the airport, this was a Japanese scientist who was walking with me, and we were walking away to 2 different terminals. And then suddenly he asked me, "Are you the same Godbole who wrote such and such paper on intrinsic charm content of the proton?" And that was actually a very interesting topic of investigations at that time. So I said, "Yes, that was my paper." And then he bowed to me in the middle of the Frankfurt airport and said, "I respect that paper." I should tell you that appreciation was worth more than any awards, any professorships, or anything else that I would ever get. In this period, I became sort of an expert in collider physics. As I said, I did work which got international recognition. Then my work actually opened new directions of research in collider physics. And in fact, unknown to me, unexpected by me, it had implications for designs of particle colliders. And then, when I was meeting timelines of international collaborations, I was staying in India. there was time differences, and at that time we didn't have Zooms and, all these techniques of communication. Email was the fastest way we would communicate with each other. It was a super hard work, but, it was fun. It was worth it. Then, 93, I think, began sort of the time of, getting rewards. Now, one doesn't do science for rewards. One does science because that's what one wants to do. But if for doing this thing that you love, you also get rewarded, if your colleagues and your community pats you on the back and says, what you're doing is going good, it feels good. So I got elected to the Indian Academy of Sciences as a fellow of the Indian Academy. I also got the Indian Institute of Technology Distinguished Alumnus Award. And I think for the second one, I was the first woman to get that award, at least the first one from Basic Sciences. In the Indian Academy of Sciences, after that, I got also elected to the Fellow of Indian National Science Academy. Then I got elected to the World Academy of Sciences. This kind of the first election served as the nucleation center for the awards and the rewards that kept on coming quite regularly after that, ending with the Padma Shri and the Order of Merit that was mentioned to you. In 1994, driven by personal reasons, imagine this, that was one decision I did for the family purposes, and I moved to Indian Institute of Science. The personal reason actually disappeared with time. I got divorced from my husband, but professionally, this turned out to be a very good. I started getting more and more involved in the scientific administration at the national level. I was members of different selection committees. I was member of the editorial board, scientific advisory committee to the government of India, India-CERN collaboration oversight committee. I started chairing a committee of that would conduct schools in theoretical high energy physics for the PhD students. And I started a series of international high energy physics workshops. I was very busy from 1994 to, I would say, 2012. Maybe after that, the activities tapered a little bit in terms of my involvement. But 2012, 2015, till then, the activities were going on. Sometimes they were at the national level, sometimes they were at the international level. And this is when I realized that we women actually do have a special edge when it comes to setting up collaborative efforts. Science is becoming more global, science is becoming more collaborative. Therefore, it's a distinct advantage if we have more women participating in the process. In fact, I moved to IISc in 1994, and as I said, I got involved in many international collaborative projects. I got involved in international study groups. I am been members of international advisory committees of different study groups. And I, of course, guided my PhD students. I wrote a book on supersymmetry. I am writing one more book on standard model. And in all this time, I must say, I didn't think much of gender and science till about 2000. I never did think of myself as a woman scientist. I wanted to be a professional scientist and valued for my science, not just some special dispensation because I happen to be a woman. As I said, now I'm an honorary professor in Indian Institute of Science for the last 5 years. And I am still continuing as an emeritus professor and doing my research. And as I said, this 2019 to 2021 were the 2 honors that Maria already mentioned. So let me now change tracks. And let me try to tell you about myself as a scientist who happens to be a woman. So around 2000, as I already mentioned, I started looking at these things through a different lens. And I realized that women do suffer due to bias. I'm not saying, for example, that the bias stopped me from reaching where I have now reached. But maybe if I were a different gender, my path might have been smoother. I might have got here sooner, or I might have got there more easily. And this is something I realized only when I started thinking back on the experiences that I had. And as I already mentioned to you, I really felt at that time that the mentoring that young women PhDs get is actually affected a little bit by what I call unconscious and invisible bias. From 2001, I have been quite involved in various efforts to increase the participation of women in science. I was the founder member of the panel for women in science of the Indian Academy of Sciences. And I was a panel chairperson for about 10 years. We brought out 2 books, which were containing stories of role models. We directed a survey, we participated in report writing, we put in place many programs for young girls and women in science. And recently, I'm very glad that I was able to contribute to the chapter on equity and inclusion in the Science and Technology Policy document of the Government of India. I was able to contribute to it as the chair of the group that drafted it. When the recommendations of that chapter would get implemented, I don't know. But again, as a small girl who didn't even study science till the 7th class, I really think I have tried to contribute to the cause as much as I could have. As I said, there has been this invisible bias, which I have been appreciated only now. And this invisible bias may be unintentional, may be unconscious, but it exists. So we need to actually discuss this, and we need to see how the challenges that women face due to the bias can be eased. What happens very often when we talk about issues or problems or the challenges of women in science, we talk about career and family balance. We talk about maternal responsibilities. We talk of caring for elder responsibilities. We talk of sexual harassments, which of course is very, very important. But we don't talk about this invisible bias, which may be affecting people's reactions to our activities. That is the importance that the community, the society assigns to a woman's contribution to research in science is not as high as it ought to be. And that impacts the way women in science get treated. So it is important to make both mentors and the mentee aware of the possibility of these invisible biases. I like a wonderful quote from Jennifer Doudna. She won the Chemistry Nobel Prize in 2020. She said, we need to ensure that women feel welcome and enabled to contribute fully to the society in whatever way they feel important to them, whether it is being through being moms, or whether it is being involved professionally, or some combination. Whereas right now what happens, that the society, community decides the priorities. And as you can see here, only the second Chemistry Nobel Prize winner of the century, Jennifer Doudna, what she has to say about it. So what do we, the question is, what is it that we need? What we need is a family support. And if there is no near family to give you support, extended family support. Generate your own support structures. Don't feel guilty about asking for help. Don't think that that's the sign of weakness. If you have to take care of more things, you need support. You need additional helping hands. And do reality checks. Okay, be confident at the same time, and don't let others decide for you, but also don't try to be a superwoman. Don't, when you set goals, be true to your goals, but be realistic about what your goals can be. And for that, you have to have a good appreciation of your own abilities. Just to give an example, I'm a theoretical physicist. So I would say, yes, I want to solve the problem of the origin of the universe. Of course, it's a fantastic aim. Do I even know whether I whether I have the adequate background? And all that can come only through education through talking, through mentoring, through reacting, and through studying. You know, life in science is not necessarily easy. It's a bit of a hard life, but I think all good things cost a little bit. All I can say that it is all worth it, especially if one is working in an exciting subject like particle physics. So I will end literally with some last words. So what is the difference between learning science, teaching science on one hand, and doing science on the other? That too, if you want to do it at the cutting edge of research, where the competition is high and the timing is of essence. Science does not wait. The body clock and the science clock both are ticking right after your PhD. And that time, you have to decide your priorities. You have to ask for help if it is needed so that you can work equally well on both the fronts. Also, being independent matters. Doing a PhD is not enough. One needs to create a niche for one's own self, and doing own thing is very, very important. Also, in science, it's not enough to have a good idea. You have to be able to ready to break your back if necessary, if you want to realize that idea into a concrete and useful investigation. I should tell you, my lessons only will be those of a theoretical physicist. As an experimental physicist, perhaps the lessons are slightly different. But the joy and the excitement is in the thinking of an idea that people have not thought about yet, and do your two bits in uncovering some aspect of the truth about nature that was not known till then. And believe me, it is possible. Even with the enormous depth that we have got understood, to which we have understood laws of nature, there is still something new to be discovered. One needs perseverance. Sometimes things take time to work out, and equally important is when to give up. Doing good research is important. Training students is important. You also need to be involved with the scientific community. And at a senior level, where I am now, you need to participate in the processes which strengthen the scientific activity in the country in simple things such as referring the journals, giving lectures at a school, the way I'm talking to you now. All this is a part of life. And I hope some of you will enjoy this. Some of you may not enjoy the life of a scientist, but you will enjoy the process of learning science and teaching science. I wish you all the very best. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Godbole. It was a really enlightening talk. I hope very inspiring for the girls that are listening and want to become scientists in the future, and with a very important set of advice, I would say. Thank you very, very much. So now, are there any questions for Dr. Godbole? Please raise your hands, open your microphone. If you cannot ask in English, you can ask in Greek and we can translate. Madziari Alexandra.
Hello, thank you for the amazing presentation. It was beautiful. Everything was so enlightening. I have a question for you. What would your advice be for people in general experiencing racism or sexism in their daily basis? Which events prevents them from being productive and creating new things in general? Thank you.
It's a very important question, Alexandra. That's your first name, right, Alexandra?
Yes, yes, it is.
So, Alexandra, thank you very much for asking this question, because it is not just a question of racial discrimination, but even the gender discrimination. Okay, I mean, one has to realize that that's what I meant by invisible bias. That when I talk about this invisible bias, it can be race, it can be gender, it can be language you speak. And I can understand that it can be very non-plussing, it can non-plus you. It can make you feel, why do I want to bother with all these things when the die is cast against me so badly? But I have realized one thing, and maybe that's what helped me, is firstly, Not everybody has the discriminatory thoughts. Find your supporters. Appreciate and understand people who think positively and take their support. I think there is a lot of strength in a group. Okay, so like-minded people putting together, getting together, and making one realize that if people are trying to put you down, that is not really the correct thing. You do not judge yourself by the remarks, the actions of the group that's discriminating against you. I know it's easy to say, it's difficult to follow, but I think my answer to general discrimination, how to cope with this, is the same as I said about gender. We have to try and create our support structures. It's not always easy, but actually I feel that and particularly in Europe, I mean, I think I may say that because I have had some experience of Europe. I think in Europe, it's much more likely to find like-minded people, and it's possible to have and find source of support in the community. And another important thing is not to let this struggle overwhelm your real aim, which is what, for example, in this particular case, doing science. So one has to keep also a sense of proportion. So I'm sorry, there are no shortcuts. There are no quick pills. There is no quick injection by which we can sort this problem out. But I have a feeling that evolution of the society that happens through, for example, the repetition of conversations like this, or many other such social conversations, they bring about a change in the social attitude. And that's, I'm a great believer in a human being's finer side. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I totally agree with you.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have another question? Yes, Vasilia. Vasilia, Sophia, there are two of you.
Yeah, I'm Sophia. Hi, thank you very much for your presentation and everything. My question is, what made you pursue science and how did you stay motivated despite everything?
Okay, that's actually two questions, but I think I can answer them one after another. From the way I described the story to you, you must have realized that till about I was 15 or 13, I didn't really know what science was. Okay, I grew up in a family which genuinely, it was a family of scholars, but my mother was a linguist. My father was an expert in politics and history. So you can imagine that we had lots of very educative discussions at home, but never in science. There was nobody who knew science. So actually, till I was about age of 15, I used to think that I knew I wanted to be a scholar, but I thought I was going to do a PhD, a doctorate, either in mathematics or in Sanskrit. So that was what I thought when I was till the age of 15 or 16. But I got interested in science beginning from this school exam when these teachers, actually, as I told you, my teacher's husband got me introduced to science, and I think that hooked me. He made me read books, which were general books about science, about scientists, people like Edison, Tesla. I read their lives. I read the lives of people like all the people, scientists like Einstein and the whole lot of 20th century heroes. And through all that reading got me interested in theoretical physics. And the state scholarship that I got from the Indian government got me in touch because of the summer schools with other students in India, in other parts of India. So I got to see a bigger world. So this is like people from Greece going to CERN for a summer school. I went to a school in India, it was just the whole of India. And talking to these people, so I learned more about science through my colleagues, through my friends, than I learned from teachers in that age. And that is where I think being part of a diverse crowd really helped. If I was still studying only in an all-women school, I wouldn't have got this diverse exposure. So that helped me. And last but not the least, my teacher in masters, who taught me theoretical physics and theoretical particle physics at that, was actually the real reason. So the choice of science happened because of these teachers, because of these colleagues, my co-students whom I met. Now, how did one keep oneself motivated? I added one line in my presentation, and I will focus on that. You know, science is a hard mistress. And particularly in the early days when we are trying to do a PhD, it's actually very difficult at times. At times, you know, I mean, I can give you an example. I worked for 1 year. I got a very nice result. I went and presented a talk to a committee. The committee people said, yes, very good, very good. Now you please write this paper. So my supervisor says, yes, now please go to the library and look for related papers. And what do I see? I see a paper which has appeared in the journal in the issue of that very month, present in the same research that I had broken my back doing the entire whole year. Now, you can imagine how I was not much older than you are. I was maybe 22 years old. I was completely disgusted with everything. But I think at that time and at such times, friends help. Like-minded people help. Building bridges helps. Talking to other people help. And having a true understanding of what you are capable of also helps. And then I don't need to believe other people when they say that this is not possible for you. If I am completely sure in my mind that I have what it takes to go through. So I think, and you need a few friends at such times to convince you of that. If you are, your confidence is wavering. And I can tell you, I was maybe 28, 29. Again, I had come back to India after my PhD, doing well, but I'm away because particle physics, as I told you, is a very global subject. At that time, the distances were not bridged easily. So you didn't know what was happening at CERN the next day, as we know it now. You would know what's happening at CERN or what has been found at CERN after 6 months or 8 months. And if you're a theorist whose work depends on what is being discovered at CERN, then this was a rather difficult situation. And I was feeling somewhat depressed at one point, not as a woman or anything, as a young physicist. And a very old friend wrote to me saying that the bug of science has bit you very early in your life. Don't think of giving it up because it is not going to leave you ever. Now, at this point that you have to ask yourself truly, at least I had to ask myself truly, is this really worth it? No. Is the worry worth it? And I felt, yes, it was. And that's how it went on. So I think a real understanding of your abilities, confidence, and being true to yourself and true to your purpose. These are the things that help you. So I hope I have conveyed to some extent the answer to your question.
Thank you very much.
Despina, do you think we can take another question? It's
Yes, I can. I don't need so much time for Alice, so
if there is if there are more,
go on.
If there are more questions, Eleni.
Hello, thank you very much for your presentation. It was really inspiring. I would like to ask you if you believe that at some point racial stereotypes will be completely eliminated in the field of science.
You're saying that, do I think that the stereotypes idea will be eliminated in science?
Yes.
Yeah, actually, I hope someday it is. In fact, I very often end my talks on the subject by saying that I hope that someday we are not talked of as women engineers or women scientists, but rather as engineers and scientists who happen to be women. Now you ask me whether I believe that this will happen. And to be honest, I do believe it will happen. Because you see, things have happened. I mean, even in the subject of particle physics, without campaigning for it, CERN has had a woman director general for the last 2 terms. So quality always tells, but the important thing is to have large numbers, because from among the many experimental scientists, male or female, you're going to choose the DG. So you need, for increasing the probability that a woman will be DG, you first need to have many more women participating in the process. And since that has started happening, and when people see that there are these examples like Fabiola Gianotti, at least in the subject of particle physics, I think the idea of stereotype is already crumbling substantially. It needs to go quite some distance, but I do believe that it's changing. And it takes time, but I think we have had a long time since Madame Marie Curie, who was fighting against such stereotypes. And there are many others, in fact. I just use Madame Marie Curie's name because that's known to all of us. But from that period and before, we can think of many others. And I do believe that we have come a long way since then. We have, as a community, as women scientists, we have come a long way. And that has happened only because of the excellence in science shown and demonstrated by many women who may not have become the DGs, who may not have become the big professors, but their contribution to science has convinced everybody that it is not only the white male, Caucasian male that can contribute to science. And I think the stereotypes are going away. And I hope that your generation will see even less of it than my generation. So that's my hope for all of us.
Thank you very much.
Another question? Do we have another one? Yes, we have from a mail. Pastos Anastasios, it says. Yes? Αναστάσιος. Ναι. Το χέρι που σηκώθηκε, Παστός Αναστάσιος.
Yes, can you hear me now? Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for representing the other gender.
Thank you. Thank you for your amazing presentation. Could you elaborate more on the kinds of negative mentoring that were given to you or that are given to women in general during their academic careers?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. I mean, I kept it like that, thinking that we will elaborate in the question and answer sessions. See, for example, one of the first piece of negative mentoring that I would say was in the fact that if today I am looking at a PhD student who has got 2 or 3 postdoctoral offers, and particularly this we are believing in 1979, I would, if I were my advisor, or if I were among the people who were advising me, I would have said, don't go back to India right now, because you're going away from the land where things are happening. And be here, stay here, get more experience, and then go back to India. Whereas on the other hand, people really didn't seem to care. They said, okay, you got your PhD, very good, good girl. She managed to finish her PhD. Now she has got even a postdoctoral offer back home. Please go. So that I consider negative mentoring. Or even at the beginning of my career, when I was a postdoctoral fellow, and as I said, I was actually doing quite well. As I said, I wrote 3 or 4 physical revelators papers in about 4 to 5 years. And I was a postdoctoral fellow for 3 years out of them. And I believe, and I still, when I see things, I believe that, at that time, some of my colleagues who had later on went on to become very good friends, very good collaborators, some of them said, oh, at that time, we didn't realize you were so serious about your science. And I don't understand, apart from being a woman, what else was there in my CV to make them feel that I was not serious about science. Because I was writing, as I said, I wrote 4 papers in physical regulators papers in 3 years. I was there for all the conferences. I was there giving my talks. I was there discussing the papers. So the only reason they thought I was not serious about science, or they went on to say that they thought I was not serious about science, is because they felt I'm a woman and I'm just waiting here to get married and settle in life and get a teaching job and go on. So that is the negative mentor. If you had a man with the same achievements, I think the same mentors would have told the person that I would have been if I was a man, that don't sell yourself short. Don't take a job at a small university. But for a girl, it doesn't matter. She's doing something that's good enough. And I do believe that this is, and at least now I can say that at the end of the day, the results have proved that I was about as successful as any one of my other male colleagues of the same period with the same age. If anything, I was a bit more successful. So, and the boundary conditions were the same for all of us. So this is what I call negative mentoring or the negative bias. And I'm not even sure that they would say to you explicitly that because you're a woman. This would be so ingrained that this is what you can aspire to. And if you have reached here, you have already reached quite a bit higher than what women would normally reach. So you have already achieved a lot. And now you can sort of, continue. You have reached the level of your, as they call, there is a famous saying in corporate world that you have reached the level of your incompetence. So that is the kind of a thinking. So these are the, for example, I remember I was a postdoc and I got an invitation to give a lecture, to participate, give actually a 12-minute parallel session presentation, okay, 12 or maybe 20-minute parallel session presentation in a series of conferences called Photon. They were labeled as Photon something, Photon 90, Photon 78, they started quite early. And these were conferences on 2-photon physics. And I had written a paper which was quite interesting in that context. And actually I got a letter from the head of the experimental group saying that we really like your paper and we would like you to come to this conference and give a 20-minute talk. Now, believe me, I was 28 years old. I felt like I was on the moon, that somebody in Germany is writing me a letter. I am sitting in India. I have written this letter from an address in India, and they are saying, we would like you to come and talk about this work. And when I went to my mentor and said, this is what I've got. If my student or my postdoc gets it today, I would move earth and heaven to make sure that that student or postdoc gets the travel grant to be able to go there. Or I would even advise that spend money from your pocket, but this is a good opportunity. But I was told, oh, we get many such invitations. Now, if this is not negative mentoring, I don't know what is. But to be honest, I did not think of all of this when I was growing and when I was going through this. At that time, I thought maybe he didn't think the work was good, not good enough. So it is only now that when I look back, I realize that there can be invisible and unconscious biases which can keep you down, or at least which prevents you from taking a path that would have accelerated your progress in the career. Let me put it this way, because this one I wouldn't call it as a specific obstacle, because I could continue my research even if I didn't go to this conference. But going to this conference was definitely would have been a good thing, and a good mentor would have told me that please go and attend this conference. I hope I have given you very concrete examples.
Okay, thank you. We might take a last question. Is there another question? Anybody? I don't see any hands.
I have had enough.
Okay. So I will thank you once again, dear Dr. Godbole, for your presence and for your support to our effort here. Once again, it's the third time you're with us. Thank you very, very much for this. Hope all the best. I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
And I hope we can see you again in such an event.
It's growing on me. Talking to Greek students is growing on me.
Okay, thank you very, very, very
And
much.
thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much for calling me. And I wish again all the people all the very best in whatever they want to do, following Dodna. Whether you want to do science or whether you want to take care only of home or whether you want to do both. The main thing is, I hope you get to do what you want to do. That is the most important thing. So let me wish all of you a lot of luck and bye-bye.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much, Rakini, for inspiring
Bye-bye. We will talk later. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. So, Despina, what we do now? Τι κάνουμε τώρα? Έμεινα στα...
Κάνουμε ένα διάλειμμα. Εγώ θα πάω στο Άλις, οπότε θέλω λίγη ώρα. Ας πούμε 10 και 4, 10 και 35.
Και 35. Ωραία.
Οκ, ελπίζω να προλάβω, εντάξει. Θα σταματήσω το recording, ένα λεπτό. Stop.
Το ξανά άνοιξες.
Stop recording. Stop cloud recording. Okay. When the cloud. Okay.
Λοιπόν, κάνουμε διάλειμμα.
Sorry, δεν το έκανα.